Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. First of all, a warm welcome to everyone and sincere thanks for being here. Asad talked about how distinguished and excellent the panel is. I think it's safe to say that our audience today is uniquely distinguished and excellent also. Especially, if I start naming one person, I should name everyone, but I think it is very important for me to mention Riaz Mohammad Khan Saab, legendary Pakistani diplomat and somebody that I think is kind of a North Star for many of us that are interested in Pakistani foreign policy. I'm particularly grateful also to the Mavish and Jahangir Siddiqui Foundation for supporting this effort, and friends from JS Bank, Imran being here is very special for us. The chairperson of the CPEC, the National Assembly Committee for CPEC, Sher Ali Arbab Saab from the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf is here. I think I'm especially happy that he's here because of what we're trying to argue in this document that my co-author, Dr. Sayyid Muhammad Ali, essentially helped frame and put together, but also delivered very nicely here. The panel that I'll be speaking to needs no introduction. Dr. Rabia Akhtar is, I think, increasingly one of the foremost foreign policy experts in the country. She assiduously avoids talking about things that she claims are outside her main area of expertise, which is Pakistan's nuclear strategy and its nuclear history and its nuclear future. But I think that the more that we're able to convince her to be engaged on these questions, the more enlightening it is for us. And then, of course, Salman Bashir Saab, the former Foreign Secretary of Pakistan, also doesn't need an introduction. And I got some complaints, Salman Saab, from members of the press that are here, most of whom are friends and should be known to you, and I'm sure are. But I got complaints that you don't engage with the press enough. So I boasted that we're going to sort that out as a result of this effort. Salman Bashir and Rabia Akhtar, I'll stop speaking very, very momentarily. I apologize. The two panelists sitting here are two of 16 experts that joined us in this journey. And because of COVID, I think it was a really difficult thing for us to try and arrange. We're all used to Zoom calls now, but you will not be surprised to know that this process started many months ago where it was still something that we were trying to get used to. And many of those experts are here today. I'm especially proud that we have Harun Sharif with us, the former chairperson of the Board of Investment. I can see Fahad Umayyo and Sitara Noor. I'm sure there's others that I should have written down that are here. You can't mouth it from that far, Asad, but it's fine. I'll apologize personally later on. I'm sure I'm missing people that are here and also people that are online. Of course, Sayyid Muhammad Ali and Asad were the drivers of this in terms of authorship, and super grateful to them. So now that I've gotten all of that out of the way, and I thought that was important, I want to stop speaking and ask you, Dr. Saiba. I'm going to ask, I promised Salman Saab that I'd ask you the hard questions and him the easy ones. So let's start with kind of some of the contention that was made and that tends to be made in Pakistan is, we're a little bit upset about our image. And I think that's right, because our image is, we have a bad image, and US policymakers, just like ordinary Americans, don't have an accurate picture of who we are. A lot has gone into building up for the Biden administration, as Salman Saab knows, and others should know, that I know for a fact that this government has tried to prepare, and some of what Dr. Mueed Yusuf said was, it rings true, because we know that the government is making a lot of effort. But then something like the Supreme Court affirmation of the Sindh High Court decision to to basically uphold the acquittal of the alleged, I think we have to say alleged now, at least from a legalese perspective, the alleged killers of Daniel Pearl happens. And it's not just an image problem. It's actually a public policy problem, because if you look at Anthony Blinken's Twitter timeline, congratulations to this, spoke to so-and-so, wonderful conversation, focus on the future. And these aren't hardcore allies in every case. Some countries that are nowhere near as close to the U.S., as embroiled with the U.S. in important things. But the only sort of messaging on Pakistan is negative, and I think it's caused by that kind of event. Let's forget about the event for a moment, but these kinds of events tend to happen all too frequently within the sphere of the Pak-U.S. relationship. How do we solve this?
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. First of all, congratulations on getting the report out to all your co-authors as well. It was great to be part of the process. A lot has been said by Ambassador Siddiqui and Dr. Moeed Yusuf and then Saeed Muhammad Ali about bringing the positives to the table. And it is quite unfortunate. It was pretty disappointing personally for me to, when this acquittal came. And it becomes difficult to be a Pakistani and then, present Pakistan's case when such cases happen. You're trying to deal with the overall negativity in the relationship. And if, let's say, like your report also suggests, and all the points Dr. Moeed made, countering terrorism is the highlight, FATF is an issue. And then when something like this happens, you really lose all the ground that you have made up to this point in time. But these things will continue to happen. I think the good thing happened was that the Sindh government joined with the federal government, filed an appeal. So at least some hope is out there. I don't know which way this is going to head. But coming back to the positives, I think Pakistan's strength does lie in the people-to-people, which has not been explored to its full potential. Your report mentions Fulbright program. That is one avenue, the largest program in the world. That is one avenue in which people like myself who have benefited from the Fulbright program, come back and try and build bridges. And I have made personal relationships. So when something like this happens and we have personal conversations with our American friends, that really helps because they know you from a different perspective and they want to understand the entire situation and they're not bogged down by Pakistan's image, which is unfortunate due to some events or whatever. But the personal relationships do matter. So reaching out to an average American, I think that is a key, and we have not been able to build on that. So that is one area where I think Pakistan should work. These negatives will remain. These negatives are not unique to Pakistan. They are rampant in the region. Look at India and the kind of press it has received post-August 5th, 2019. Yet, you see every Indian chin up and, just going on Twitter and social media as if nothing has happened. So I think Pakistan needs to have, look at the positives, work on the personal relationships, work on the space that exists in the people-to-people area to mitigate some of the negatives in this relationship.
I really appreciate that response. I think it's spot on. I also felt it was imperative that we do mention, because I think it's important to deal with elephants in the room, and I think when we'll have a chance to hear from a couple of the American interlocutors and friends after we're done discussing this, and I'm sure they will bring things like this up. So I think it's important for us to try and tackle them. Salman Sahab, I mentioned Sher Ali Arbab being here, and I do think it's poignant and important. Is this too optimistic, this idea? This is the easy question. Is it too optimistic, the idea that Pakistan can somehow recreate its salience in the world in the kind of mid to late 60s and the way in which it supported the bridging of what then was a stark distance between China and the US? Is that too optimistic? Are there lower levels of sort of low-hanging fruit that we should be thinking about? Or are you afraid, despite what we've recommended in the report, that the trajectory of where things are going, we will become part of the bloc that Dr. Moeed Yusuf says we intend not to?
Well, thank you, Mosharraf. I wish to compliment you and Muhammad Ali Saab and Asad for all the effort that has gone into this report. Of course, Ambassador Ali Jahangir Siddiqui, I must acknowledge I had the opportunity to see him at work in Washington, and he made tremendous breakthroughs despite the systems and despite the obstacles. For instance, the Prime Minister's visit to Washington, to the White House, was only made possible because largely due to his efforts, even when he was no longer the ambassador. But I'm not letting out a secret. I wish to sort of acknowledge the important contribution you continue to make in terms of the Pakistan-US relationship. Well, there is a lot of wishful thinking in this report. One would have hoped that the advent of the Biden administration would bring a healing touch. He said this, he wants to heal the nation, his inaugural address. But I also believe that the world needs healing after 4 very rocky years. But so far what we are seeing is that what Moeed Yusuf said, a lot of things from the past coming to the present. And it is important to sort of, take into account that the world has changed, the US has changed, the region has changed, and Pakistan has changed. So, if you look at our 70 plus years of history, one word, I think, sort of describes the desire, the wish of the Pakistani state, or the Pakistani state institutions. Quote unquote relevance. We've always tried very hard to have salience, as you said, or relevance vis-a-vis the United States. For whatever reasons, some national, some others, but our past history reflects that amply. And if I go back, Riaz Muhammad Khan Sahab is here, so he is, he knows everything much deeply, and he thinks much more deeply than I do. But I recall that when the Soviets walked into Afghanistan in '79, there was a sizable body of opinion within the foreign ministry which had question marks about our policy. I mean, to what extent we should get embroiled in that phase, as Riaz Saab has often called it, the last hot front of the Cold War. That was the defining time, which led to the unilateral movement for the United States. 2001, again, I'm talking of the past, but every government in the Pakistani state has tried very hard to keep its relevance to the United States. This report and the effort that has gone behind it, as well as the previous one which was released in Washington, only indicates, I think, again, and flags all the main drivers, as Muhammad Ali Saab said. It only indicates the wish of the Pakistani state to have good, cooperative, friendly relations with the United States government and people. So I think from what I gathered, and I think what Moeed articulated is true if you sort of bring all the statements, official and the Prime Minister's statements, and of the Army Chief, the change in paradigm to economic security and development. This is what is new. This has to be registered by the think tanks, by the system, by the institution, the United States. I think there is ample scope for cooperation, not only given this new paradigm or this old paradigm which is being sort of revived with greater vigor now. I have written, to your question, the wishful part, China, US, Indo-Pacific. I personally think that globalization is a reality. I have contributed articles to the Green Book, the Pakistan Army Green Book, for 3 years, arguing that there is no way you can get a peaceful world without China-US cooperation. It is good for the United States as it is good for the world, and it's good for the region, for our region. One can, if one allows to sort of operate the basis of region rather than rage, then you will start seeing identifying a lot of opportunities, overlapping interests. We thought, a few months ago that there was a complete convergence of interests between Pakistan, at least the White House, the Taliban, vis-a-vis Afghanistan, and to a certain extent, in the interest of peace and stability in Afghanistan. And it was not just US, Pakistan, Afghanistan. There was also convergence on Afghanistan vis-a-vis US, China, and Russia. We have been arguing, and I have been saying it, and you know it very well in the heart of Asia, that there is no solution. I mean, of course, there is no military solution. But two, there can be no durable political solution without an economic foundation. And that is where Pakistan, together with the United States and China and Russia and everybody else in the world, play a helpful role. Unless you start changing the war economy scenario in Afghanistan, you cannot hope for durable peace. These proxy games will continue. The spoilers will be there or will be brought in all the time. I think our American friends need to realize this. So, in terms of the bigger picture, I think we should continue to sort of at least talk about it, the validity of what we are saying and the significance of it, not only for us, but for Afghanistan and for the US. So there are several areas where we can cooperate, trilaterally. Quad, for instance, was one instance where Russia, China, US, and then Pakistan. This is the Afghanistan Quad.
This is the Quad for good rather than the Quad for evil.
But while globalization
please censor kar dijiyega.
is not you cannot reverse that. It has always, the world history is basically globalization. Similarly, in my assessment, in this age, in this century, the bloc politics is not a viable option. You will see this happen when the Southeast Asians or even the Europeans will be able to sort of, sift all this and take a position on the bigger picture. So I think, I don't know whether, as the report says, to hope to play the role of a bridge. Of course, we can aspire to that. But let's stay out of the Indo-Pacific. Indo-Pacific should stop on our eastern borders and let the Indians have the joy of it. And onwards, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and the rest, I think this idea of geoeconomics and connectivity and stability and peace, I think that is absolutely perfect pathway to define in our conversations and maybe in official conversations between our governments.
But we certainly hope that's the case. I want to bring in, I'm going to ask others to also sort of speak. But Rabia, you had a couple of responses or reflections on what Salman Saab was saying.
Very briefly. So the historian in me has been really patiently listening that past is no longer to be heeded to. I think there is nothing wrong with the past Pak-US relations. What is it to this present relationship you're bringing from the past? You're bringing India, which is still your central policy focus. You're bringing Afghanistan. You're bringing terrorism. And the only new thing Pakistan has to do is to manage its China-US relationship, which wasn't as pronounced as it was in the past. The thing Pakistan needs to do is to learn the right lessons from the past. We weren't able to sell our threat perceptions vis-a-vis India or repeat affairs to the US, which didn't take us seriously on it. Second point I wanted to make is about geoeconomics and geostrategy in this region. I am all for connectivity and integration, and it's a great direction Pakistan is taking. But this domain that we are in is not a mutually exclusive domain of influence where geostrategy will stop to matter. India is being propped up by the US in economic, defense, and military domain. How can Pakistan ignore it and not table its reservations to the US with that respect? Ambassador Saab has talked about bloc politics. US itself is doing bloc politics. And it is the one driving the entire foreign policies of the region. So for Pakistan to sit back and say that we'll only talk economy and we will not talk strategy because that's the direction we are taking, I think a balance of both would probably serve Pakistan's purpose well. Thank you.
I think that's, it makes me reflect on a question that, perhaps I'd like both of you to respond to, which is, we framed clearly and we've distinguished between geoeconomics and geopolitical or geostrategic concerns. I think Rabia is absolutely right. It's not as clear a line perhaps as it would seem at first blush. Is it also the case that perhaps what we're actually arguing is that whatever geostrategic advantage or disadvantage we have must be funneled or processed through the lens of the Pakistan economy, as opposed to through any other lens, without getting into the debate of what the counterfactuals are. And in that instance, then it isn't harmful for Pakistan to invest more deeply in its geostrategic location for the purposes of a stronger economy. So if you look at Aman 21, this massive naval exercise in which, amazingly, Pakistan has already served as a bridge for the US and Russia in this instance. And that hasn't happened in, I think, close to 2 decades. Is that an adequate example of the shift, Salman Saab, or are we still sort of using the implements of the military hardware and the hard state that has always been, in a sense, overdeveloped and overfinanced with respect to the rest of the country?
But Mosharraf, you see, the point is that even in the US, you see a lot of people now arguing for them, because security is a composite, holistic concept. You cannot have hard security without economic development. I think there is a clear realization in the concerned circles within Pakistan that we need to give that priority to the development aspects. And I think you cannot just, take the example of India. There was this hype, the rise and shine, whatnot. So you create a narrative and you sort of, write that narrative. And they have created a lot of negative narratives which have been sort of ignored by the international community. But the point is that COVID, even if COVID was not there, it is like the growth is negative territory, plus 20% GDP. So the point is that without due focus on economic development, I have narrated this a number of times, and Riaz Saab has served in China, but there is this phrase that is stuck in my mind. The Vice Minister Wu Wei, in one of our conversations at the Chinese Foreign Ministry, he sort of stopped me and said, "But Ambassador, you do not understand. China's strategic priority number 1 is development, and we will pursue it even if the heavens were to fall." That is the sort of perseverance, determination by which they sort of pursued development, and see where they are today. India has not been able to do that. And I know it's not probably appropriate at this point in time to speak about the Trump administration or President Trump, but President Trump painted a very, very, not so optimistic picture of the state of US infrastructure, for instance. And there is the realization by the Biden administration they ought to. You have heard that thing that the Chinese spent $15 trillion on development and the Americans spent $15 trillion on war in the last so many years. So that is the sort of lesson that we need to learn in this country and start correcting course. Everything should be based on our national interest. We will become relevant to the US only if we are able to develop our own strengths, be they institutional or economic, and in the human security sector.
Understood. I want to just dig a little further. It also relates to a question that Ali Zia Jafri has put in, and he's asking specifically for your response, Salman Saab. He's saying, what, in your opinion, should be the way to convince or compel or persuade the United States to be more sensitive and responsive to Pakistan's concerns vis-a-vis the negative effect of the US-India relationship on Pakistan's economy, really? And I think, the basic exchange cooperation agreement and the quantum of signals intelligence sharing that will be part of that agreement is one indicator. Now, instead of spending diplomatic and financial resources perhaps on building a road to Kazakhstan or Kyrgyzstan or a pipeline, Pakistani diplomacy and the finance ministry will be thinking about how it can defend itself against the new quantum of intelligence that that India will have as a result of that exchange. So that's one example of what Jafri Saab is asking. How does Pakistan convince? I mean, we've had great diplomats in Washington D.C. None, I think, better than as you mentioned, as Ali Jahangir Siddiqui. But what is the? I'm going to lose a lot of friends on that. What is the? Clearly, the quality of our ambassador does not seem to matter on that front. What is it that matters that will enable Pakistan to convince the U.S. that that kind of thing makes it harder for Pakistan to make the kind of shift it wants to make and be that bridge?
Well, the first thing is what will it make for the U.S. to be convinced that we are making that shift? This will require a whole of nation effort. It cannot be done just by a few speeches. I think a lot of hard work has to go to make that difference. But I think on the question that, given the clear blind eye on the part of the U.S. to India's realities within India as a state, it's the way it's regressed in every domain in terms of civility. Even if you just ignore the economic slide, but complete blind eye towards happening in Kashmir. That is not value-based policy. I mean, we really would hope, and we should continue to hope, that that healing touch that Biden spoke of is for everybody. So that has to be sort of somehow worked by the Department of State with their approach on human rights, espousal of normative standards.
Yeah. And I think we've talked about that in the report.
How does it apply actually to India?
Yeah. So we've talked a little bit about that in the report, and Rabia, before, so we have, I believe we have Dr. Marvin Weinbaum and Dana Marshall, who are going to join us remotely and share their reflections on the report, which they've had a chance to see. But before we go to them, I wanted to ask you, Dr. Saiba, I think one thing that Salman Bashir said that was really interesting was it'll have to be a whole-of-nation effort, and it can't be an ambassador or you know, Faisal Tirmizi, who's here, who's head of the U.S. desk at the Foreign Office, and who served for many years in the U.S. and in many other places. It really doesn't matter how good the diplomacy is, because there are other factors, other aspects of national power that need to come together. Again, the hard question for you, and you can thank Salman Saab for this, given where we are right now, the domestic, and maybe not so much even domestic politics or domestic institutional, but just everything domestically, the weakness of the economy, the impact of the COVID-19 crisis, the fragility of the Afghan peace process, you put all that together, it's a lot to carry for a nation that's struggling to, you know, bring things together. I think there's a lot of positive, as you mentioned, but all of this adds a uniquely cumbersome burden onto Pakistan. How will this play out? Give me the optimistic view.
I think when we get into the room, although the negotiating table or the back channels before the structured dialogue could start with the US, we need to have a clear priority. I don't think Pakistan has fared any less than other nations dealing with COVID. In fact, our track record, as the world has acknowledged, our strengths come from that. I think with respect to what Salman Saab talked about, strategic stability in the region or the India question, my major concern going forward with Pak-US relations with respect to that is to tell the US in no uncertain terms that it being an extra-regional force in the region, having influence on both Pakistan and India, is the main driver of instability, of deterrence instability in particular. Because from one hand, it talks about crisis management and pulling both the countries apart, managing the crisis for them, while on the other hand, it is the world's largest arms exporter, and India is the second largest arms importer, and US figures hugely, in its defense and military calculus. So I think we need to prioritize. We need to, lay down our terms without compromising on our national and foreign policy economic interests.
I think that's a viable way forward. If we're able to bring on Dr. Weinbaum, we should. And while we hook that up and before he appears on the screen, one thing we were really excited about in putting this together was this shift from strategic and geopolitical to geoeconomic. Harun Saab, would it be mighty imposition if maybe I asked somebody to bring you a mic and maybe you could share some reflections channeled through your experience as chairperson of the BOI. Front row right here. Front row. Thank you. And also just the report itself. Thanks, Harun Saab.
Thank you very much, Mosharraf. Hello. Thank you very much, Mosharraf, and congratulations on organizing this and getting this report done. A few things before I comment what you are asking. So when I hear the speeches these days from the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi, or even now Mueet and few others, so I'm actually very pleased that my year in the government, there are 4 words which they have started talking. So first of all, Prime Minister has started saying, well, I'm sure there are a number of people who will take credit, but at least I can say that I was instrumental in putting those words in conversations. So first is that wealth creation is a good thing. So Prime Minister has started saying that. He also started saying ease of doing business was Pakistan's, primary thing. Shah Mahmood Qureshi started the word economic diplomacy, and I'm a little bit responsible for that. And now Mueed is talking from, geostrategic to geoeconomics. Actually, it's a good thing that people have started talking. But to sustain that momentum, what Salman Saab is saying, one needs to work on building a consensus nationwide in the fragmented society and institutional, consensus as well to take that forward. So we have been, we have started giving these signals. Now, my take on very specific this connectivity and, with my several years which I spent in the World Bank on regional connectivity. So on a lighter tone, Riaz Sahab and I was sitting in Delhi a few years back and, talking the same things. And people have spoken about it. And today I'm told that it's Mirza Ghalib's 220th birthday as well. So Riaz Sahab actually said, kya kare kya tha? Magar tabiyat idhar nahi aati. There was some share. So India, Pakistan, Ghalib ka sher tha. So abhi in this transition which we are saying from globalization to sub-regional blocks, which are inevitable. To me, the priority from now, at least talking about these things, it will be important for Pakistan's diplomacy to convince themselves first that there is a new market emerging. Let me assure you, we ourselves are confused because we have not put an effort to understand the transition which is going on here. Let's confess that. Once we are convinced that there is a new economic geography emerging, then we can actually with confidence, start engaging with multiple partners and explaining that. To me, in my humble opinion, timing-wise, we are not ready for it at this point in time. We could wish for, but we are not really ready for it. Now, having worked with China as the lead on industrial cooperation, and I'm still working with China, I am actually, the first year, the message from China was, to me at least, that they didn't want to indulge into a trade Cold War or something with the US. It was consistent. Shared prosperity, development, we don't want to get into this Cold War. Unfortunately, in the past 1 year, actually the line is getting hardened even in Beijing. So now Pakistan's first priority to me for the time being would be internal. We need to revive our economy first. Rather than playing a role either between US and China, we are not ready for it. I'll be very candid here in my opinion. And also we tried to play a role between Iran and Saudi Arabia. I won't go into further details. So getting back to it, my final comment on this whole report's, very good suggestions, is that today's dialogue of economic diplomacy is not that you open up space through diplomacy and then come into investment transaction. It's the other way around. You put an economic transaction on table and structure dialogue around it. That's what China has done. They have put the economic transactions on the ground. And our diplomacy, when I speak to ambassador colleagues, I think Ali came obviously from private sector, structuring a transaction is just, we are not geared to do that.
I think
these are a few comments.
I really appreciate that, and I think it's deeply insightful, that last point that you made. I'm a little bit more optimistic, just given the fact that so much progress has been made, and people like, again, like Siddiqui Saab, but also like Rabia, who's on the Foreign Minister's Advisory Council, and is increasingly a voice for connectivity with Central Asia. So you see a lot of receptivity that wasn't there before, even during the process of putting together this document.
People have started talking about it.
Definitely
our capability now to put some transactions in this direction is very weak, and that's where we need to invest. And then people will start, for instance, if you remember when I was in the World Bank, no matter good or bad, I put together this CASA 1000.
Sure.
There was a project and people started, aligning behind it. So you need to put Pakistan, rather than other countries to come and offer us transaction, we should take the lead in putting some transactions on table.
I think that's a great point, and I think this is the moment at which we'll transition to Dr. Marvin Weinbaum. He's a well-known entity for, and everybody here at least, and for many years has watched Pakistan, and I think in a bittersweet sort of way has also loved Pakistan a little bit, although that might not be safe for him to say in Washington. Dr. Weinbaum, I hope you can hear what I just said, and we're really...
Yes, hello, can I be heard?
Yes, loud and clear.
Hello?
We can hear you, Doc.
Okay, fine. Well, I'm just delighted to be able to offer a few words here about a report that I very much have anticipated, look forward to, as a complement to what we try to do here in Washington. I indeed find this report to be very, very important because it provides, as we very much try to, it provides a pathway. We're not intending to make any kind of expectation here of what public policy is going to be, but to give an idea of what is possible and what is at least worth working toward. Now, I find the report itself to be measured, to be realistic, I believe, in what is necessary to happen to improve the relationship. It is so well written, and I think that I want to stress that the way in which it's written, I think, is really so impelling as well. Now, I think this comes at an excellent time here because we have a new administration, and it's an administration that has made a point here of strengthening its relationship with its traditional partners. And certainly Pakistan fits into that category despite all of the valleys and peaks and valleys in the relationship. We remain partners, and in fact, perhaps in some respects, more importantly than previously. And it also comes at a time when there has been a general convergence here of interest about Afghanistan. And I think we recognize here that as the U.S. forms its policy for the region, Pakistan is not at the center of it by any means. Afghanistan is, and tangentially Iran. So that what we're focusing here now is a period, at least for the last year, when there was a agreement here that of the kind of settlement we wanted to have in Afghanistan. Unfortunately, we've not seen enormous progress toward that end. But at least it's been, I think, an ideal time. And what we stressed in our Washington report was that because it was not a time when there were major issues between the two countries, it was a good time to think about trying to reset this. Now, the Pearl case here has come up. Yes, this is a poison pill in a relationship, but I don't think it's going to be a driver. Those people who have formed opinions have done so anyway, and I don't think this is going to be difficult. What I do worry about, though, going forward here, is that there are black swans out there, which could take what I think are opportunities here to follow up on this report, which has so many dimensions to it, as you've been introduced by Muhammad Ali. Going farther than we did in our Washington study, honestly. And I'm very pleased, and I know Dana Marshall is going to say a few words after I finish. It is very important also because it stresses the geo-economic strategic elements in the relationship, and more than we did. And so I really commend it on that score. But I worry about these black swans. We're always concerned, of course, about the course of Indian-Pakistan relations and how this could derail anything else if that should get out of hand. But more immediately here, and more possibly concerned, here is a bad outcome in Afghanistan. And we may see, I believe, that front, that particular issue moving very quickly now, as the U.S. has to make what is perhaps the most important decision for this region that it faces, maybe more important than other regions, and that is what to do in terms of American presence in Afghanistan, what kind of presence to have. But I'm convinced that our relationship will never return to what it was for the 1990s when the United States walked away from the region. That time, we did not have an issue called global terrorism. We did not worry about proliferation. The United States view of the region has changed also because of the change in our relationship with Russia and China and the continuing difficult relationship with Iran. So the idea that the U.S. can afford to, and I believe that we have a good foreign policy team here now in Washington, but that it can afford to entertain the idea of disengagement from the region. Pakistan is going to be a key player here. The future of Afghanistan. It's impossible to imagine that being a positive development without Pakistan, without cooperation between these two countries. And so I'm hopeful that the relationship here now can remain a productive one, because we're going to need that kind of partnership if things don't go the way we would like to see them go in Afghanistan. If things get much more difficult there, it's going to be important for the U.S. and Pakistan to work down to contain what may be a very difficult set of developments in Afghanistan. So let me just conclude by saying again that we need to have people like gathered here in Washington, and what you have done there in Islamabad. We need to have this. We need to have this for guidance here. And the hope is that we can put, in both cases, we've already done a good deal of this here, but there's a new administration, that we can put these reports before people who are, we hope, looking for new ways to address this relationship. These reports together give, I think, them ideas that they can work with. And I think it may be aspirational, but I believe that makes a major contribution. So let me conclude with those remarks.
Fantastic, Dr. Weinbaum.
Thanks, Marvin. Maybe I can, first of all, let me associate myself very strongly with what Marvin said regarding the report itself. Certainly congratulations to the authors of this very important and very timely paper. I think it is a significant contribution on how to build a Pakistani geo-economic national strategy. I did read the report, though, with one specific question in mind, which was how to further shape its economic policy suggestions into actions that might be seen as mutually beneficial in both Pakistan and the United States, and that hold the promise of being effective. So I looked at this from a very practical perspective. I think we can all agree that no one has any more time for policy daydreaming. We need to promote ideas that will actually produce measurable results in Pakistan, Afghanistan, and in the United States. Results in the form of job creation, exports, investment, stability, etc. And we must exclude items that are likely going to end up as dead ends. Regrettably, we've seen enough of those. Some of you know I've been heavily involved for years on the politics and economics of the U.S.-Pakistan commercial relationship. I've helped to promote the old ROZ, the Reconstruction Opportunity Zone program, and have advised American companies on major projects in Pakistan. So I bring that background and hopefully that practical spirit to the recommendations that I'm going to put out now. So I see the report as identifying three big baskets of goals, not in any order perhaps of importance, but just to put them out. Expanding economic and job opportunities in Pakistan, promoting stability in Afghanistan, especially after the anticipated, perhaps substantial American drawdown. And the third is to encourage meaningful, emphasize meaningful ways in which American firms may be able to work with Chinese counterparts on CPEC projects. Now, there are several approaches, of course, on goal number one, expanding Pakistan's economy, and one could devote many such meetings to that. But let me focus on that in the context of the bilateral Pakistan-U.S. relationship. As the report points out, Pakistan's exports to the United States could expand considerably if its firms undertook an expanded effort to sell products that are generally considered good prospects in the U.S. market, like medical equipment, sports and leisure products, and many others. The U.S. Generalized System of Preferences, referred to in the report, I might note, has lapsed at the end of last year. Now, there's no need for panic. This has happened a lot where the program has lapsed and it has been reinstated sometimes months later. But what this does is it could give the possibility for Pakistan and friends of Pakistan to promote the inclusion of competitive products that are not normally included, that are not currently included in the program, like shoes or others. And as has observed again many times before, exporters could utilize the GSP, the existing GSP program, once it's reinstated much more effectively. Related to this, that I might note, is the great importance that the Biden administration attaches to international labor rights. I think it's clear that that issue is a lot more important for this administration for many reasons. I think Pakistan could credibly launch an ethical sourcing initiative, which would highlight its improvements in this area. Now, what about next steps in this basket, the first of three? I think they could include mounting a virtual, or when the time is right, an in-person and focused industry trade missions from Pakistan to the United States in these sectors. Pakistan could also approach U.S. government agencies such as USTR and the State Department for assistance on using GSP more effectively and on making a case potentially for adding more tariff items to the reinstated U.S. GSP program. Turning to goal number two, stability in Afghanistan, one might consider a version of the highly successful qualifying industrial zone program that the United States has had in place in Egypt for decades. I was involved actually with that program when I was last in the U.S. government. The QIZ facilities in Egypt have exported in 2019 $1 billion to the United States, and even in the terrible year of last year, the exports were $800 million. These QIZ facilities in Egypt, which are all across the country, are employing tens of thousands of Egyptians today in manufacturing a wide range of goods that come in duty-free for this program. A kindred program for Afghanistan might provide as well duty-free entry for a wide range of products from Afghanistan to the U.S., but like the QIZ program requiring an Israeli component into Egypt, a program like this in Afghanistan could require a Pakistan component into Afghanistan. The Israeli component is about 11-12%. One could imagine substantially higher component requirement of Pakistan inputs into these products. The next step here could be perhaps to commission a focused scoping study to develop specific options for such an initiative and to discuss practical issues with businesses that would actually use this mechanism, and then, of course, to promote the idea in Washington. On the third and final basket, that is the CPEC U.S., the Holy Grail, can American companies be involved? As we know, American companies for years have been interested in these projects. Certainly developing such business opportunities on these major projects for American companies would be seen very positively both by the companies themselves, obviously, and by the American government. The next step here, I think in some ways is deceptively simple. I mean, Pakistan could take the initiative and call for a meeting, perhaps again virtually at this time, that they would chair, that would include interested American firms and U.S. government agencies like GFC, the new OPIC, the U.S. Exim Bank, and others, Commerce Department, with Chinese enterprises to examine repeat actual opportunities. Of course, the important precondition is that a Chinese agreement for a good faith effort on its part to collaborate meaningfully and provide substantial opportunities for American companies to be involved. So just wrapping this up, I hope these ideas will maybe define and extend a bit what's in the paper already, very valuable recommendations in them. Obviously, be happy to discuss these further if useful. And let me also thank the authors, and especially Muhammad Ali, for the opportunity to comment. Thank you.
Wonderful. If my mic is still working, first of all, great thanks to Marvin and to Dana for joining us. And I think both of them offered some very interesting and important observations. Dr. Weinbaum's observation that if things don't go quite as well as they need to in Afghanistan, the value of a functioning and good relationship between the U.S. and Pakistan will be even more enhanced, which is something perhaps that folks don't always think through when they decide to pick up, the rhetorical battle axes. And I thought Dana Marshall's intervention was brilliant. I think it aligns perfectly with what Harun Sharif had mentioned, and I noticed the great interest with which Sher Ali Arbab was watching. I would love to continue the conversation, but I realize that dinner is A, ready, and B, it's 9 p.m., so we're already several minutes past our timeline. There are a number of questions that have come up online. Sorry. Oh, no, there's a couple of questions online. I'll just address them, and then we will discuss them over dinner, which is not my way of not answering the questions. Shandana has asked why Pakistan doesn't ask the Afghan Taliban to go back to Afghanistan. I'll answer a short version of that, which is there are 2.5 million Afghans in Pakistan, and Pakistan since 1979 has not asked the Afghans to go back. I hope Pakistan never does. I know that there are strong views on stage and off that differ with that. It's a very interesting topic of conversation, and we should definitely have it. The other question that was asked was by Arsalan, and it was about why the U.S. doesn't do something about Kashmir. I think we will spend all of our dinner discussing exactly that. It's a question we pose to our American friends all the time. There are many geopolitical and geoeconomic reasons both for that. I welcome and thank everyone that engaged online. Hopefully this is still streaming. I want to once again thank the Mavish and Jahangir Siddiqui Foundation for financing this effort. And most of all, I think I want to thank the expert panel group, General Wahid Arshad, Ijaz Haider, Ehsan Malik, who's the CEO of the Pakistan Business Council, Huma Fakhr, another business person, the folks that I've already mentioned that are here today, some that wanted to be here but couldn't be here, Simbal Khan, Azima Chima, and obviously Dr. Akhtar and Salman Bashir. We had a wonderful expert group and really benefited from them. Finally, before we close and before I ask all of you to join us for dinner and we discuss this, I want to thank the press that was here in, I have to say, substantial numbers given COVID and the kind of very limited and sparse event that we tried to hold. So thanks to the press, and I hope that you'll be able to reflect on the discussion as it took place and help enlighten folks in terms of how we think about these issues. I want to thank our colleagues and friends from the Foreign Office for being here and taking an interest. Word of thanks to the National Security Division and everybody there that enabled Dr. Moeed to take part. And the reason I'm going really fast is because once I think about dinner, I have to get to dinner. But the other reason is also that I don't want to forget to thank the team that at Tabadlab that brought this all together. It's not actually easy in these circumstances to arrange a live plus offline online event, which I think looked really good when I was cheating and watching it on YouTube while I was sitting here. So thanks to the whole team. I won't name each and every one of them, but the Tabadlab is really lucky to have the young and brilliant Pakistani talent that we do, and we look forward to expanding the size of the team and deepening their experience in this and other areas of public policy in Pakistan, around the region, around the world. Jazakallah khair to everyone, and thank you for joining us today.